Something feels different right now around the Minnesota Vikings. Not loud, not flashy, just different. There's movement behind the scenes, cap space suddenly opening up, new leadership stepping into the spotlight, and a few decisions that could completely reshape what this roster looks like before training camp even arrives. The kind of decisions that can quietly change expectations before a single preseason snap is played. And before we're done today, we're going to talk about a player who might become one of the most important weapons Kevin O'Connell has added in years without getting nearly the attention he deserves. There's a reason Vikings fans have been watching June 1st like it was circled on the calendar for months. Not because of a game, not because of a draft pick, because money creates opportunity in the NFL, and opportunity creates options. With the post-June 1st cap savings from Jonathan Allen and additional relief tied to Harrison Smith's departure, Minnesota suddenly finds itself with extra flexibility. And that timing couldn't be more interesting because the franchise is also entering a new era in the front office. Nolan Teasley has officially stepped in after replacing Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and now everyone is waiting for his first move. First impressions matter, especially when a fan base is looking for clues about what comes next. What does a new general manager do when cap space opens up and several proven veterans are still sitting on the market? That's where things get interesting. The Vikings already invested heavily in the draft, selecting Caleb Banks and Dominique Orange to help rebuild the defensive front. But let's be honest, draft picks bring potential. Veterans bring certainty. That's why names like Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney immediately grab attention. Van Noy may be 35 years old, but Brian Flores knows exactly who he is. The connection goes back years, and Flores understands how to maximize players who fit his aggressive style. Even after a quieter 2025 season, Van Noy remains the type of veteran who understands assignments, sets edges, and helps younger players develop. Then there's Clowney. For over a decade, he's been one of those players who keeps finding ways to matter. The sack numbers fluctuate, the teams change, yet somehow he remains productive. Coming off an 8.5 sack season with Dallas, he still looks capable of contributing meaningful snaps. And for a team trying to stay competitive while younger players grow into bigger roles, that matters. But underneath all of this sits the real storyline. The Vikings didn't move on from Jonathan Greenard without a plan. They did it because they believe Dallas Turner is ready. That's the gamble. That's the bet. Turner flashed whenever Greenard was unavailable, recording 9 sacks and generating pressure consistently. Now the training wheels are off. Minnesota is essentially saying, it's your turn. Maybe a veteran gets added. Maybe Teasley makes his first splash. Either way, one of the biggest questions facing this defense may come down to whether Dallas Turner can become the player this organization believes he can be. Sometimes the biggest questions on a roster aren't about stars. They're about stability. They're about who cleans up mistakes, who communicates in the secondary, and who keeps everything organized when chaos starts unfolding before the snap. Those players don't always get headlines, but everyone notices when they're missing. That's why an interesting trade possibility has started gaining attention. Minnesota lost Harrison Smith this offseason, and replacing someone like that isn't as simple as plugging another name into the lineup. You don't replace years of leadership overnight. You replace it piece by piece. That's where Jeremy Chinn enters the conversation. The veteran safety has quietly built one of the most productive tackling resumes in football. Over the last 2 seasons alone, he's averaged more than 115 tackles per year. Think about that for a second. Those aren't accidental numbers. That's a player constantly around the football. Adam New from Vikings territory recently floated Chinn as a possible trade target, and the reasoning makes sense. Minnesota waited until the 3rd round to address safety in the draft. There is talent in the room, but there isn't a ton of proven experience. Chinn brings both. He's started 82 NFL games since entering the league. He's seen different systems, different coaches, different challenges. The coverage concerns are fair. Nobody is pretending he's some elite center field ball hawk. But in Brian Flores' defense, versatility matters, physicality matters, reliability matters. Chinn checks several of those boxes. The Raiders currently have him entering the final year of his contract, which naturally raises questions about his long-term future there. Could Minnesota inquire? Absolutely. Would it cost much? That's another conversation entirely, and one the front office would have to weigh carefully. What makes this intriguing isn't whether Chinn is a superstar, it's whether he represents the type of veteran presence this defense may still need after saying goodbye to one of the most respected players in franchise history. Because sometimes championships aren't built solely through stars. Sometimes they're built through smart additions that make everyone around them better. One thing became clear when the Vikings traded Jonathan Greenard. This organization wasn't simply making a financial decision. They were making a statement about confidence, a statement about development. A statement about believing younger players are ready to carry more responsibility. But believing and knowing are two different things. That's why another veteran name continues to surface in conversation surrounding Minnesota's pass rush. The player? Cameron Jordan. And honestly, it's hard not to understand why people keep bringing him up. Last season in New Orleans, Jordan reminded everyone that age doesn't automatically end production. 10 sacks, consistent pressure, strong run defense, nearly 600 defensive snaps. Those aren't retirement numbers. Those are contribution numbers. Fansided's Justin Carter recently argued that teams needing pass rush help should be calling Jordan's agent immediately. The logic is simple. Even if Dallas Turner breaks out, depth wins football games. Injuries happen. Rotations matter. Long seasons wear down defensive fronts. Jordan could provide insurance while also bringing something younger players can't replicate overnight: experience. Tons of it. The kind that shows up in critical moments late in the season. What makes this even more interesting is Nolan Teasley's background. Coming from Seattle, he witnessed firsthand how important pass rush depth can be during championship pursuits. The Seahawks leaned on waves of defenders. They didn't ask one player to carry everything. They spread responsibility across the roster. Could Teasley bring that philosophy to Minnesota? It wouldn't be surprising. And then there's Brian Flores. Blake Cashman recently shared how excited he was that Flores remained with the Vikings instead of leaving for a head coaching opportunity. That speaks volumes. Players love playing for him. They trust him. They buy into his system. When veterans join teams, coaching often matters just as much as money. Flores gives Minnesota credibility. Jordan would undoubtedly see that. The film already answered whether Cameron Jordan can still help an NFL defense. The bigger question is whether Minnesota believes one more veteran piece could push this defense from good to genuinely dangerous heading into 2026. Every offseason has a move that gets overlooked because it isn't glamorous enough. It doesn't dominate headlines. It doesn't break the internet. Then 6 months later, everybody looks back and says, maybe we should have paid more attention to that. There is a growing chance that move could be Jauan Jennings. Let's be honest. Most of the attention in Minnesota's receiver room belongs to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Rightfully so. Defenses spend entire weeks trying to figure out how to slow them down. But football isn't always about the stars everyone expects. Sometimes it's about the player who forces defenses into uncomfortable choices. That's where Jennings becomes interesting. Ben Lieber recently described him as a throwback player, and honestly, that's the perfect description. He isn't built around flashy route-running highlights. He isn't trying to win beauty contests. He wants contact. He wants physical football. He wants to make defenders uncomfortable for 4 quarters. Last season in San Francisco, Jennings caught 55 passes, scored 9 touchdowns, and consistently found ways to impact games. But the statistics only tell part of the story. What stands out is his mentality. This is the type of receiver who blocks with purpose, the type who competes for contested catches, the type who brings an edge that spreads throughout an offense. Kevin O'Connell loves versatility, and Jennings offers plenty of it. He can line up across formations. He can create mismatches against safeties. He can force defenses into personnel decisions they don't want to make. Lieber made a great point about that. Defenses may struggle deciding whether to cover him with bigger defenders or smaller defensive backs. Either option creates potential problems. That's valuable, especially when Jefferson and Addison are already demanding attention elsewhere. The more attention those stars command, the more opportunities open up for players like Jennings. And maybe that's what makes this signing so intriguing. Minnesota didn't just add another receiver, they added a different style of receiver. A player capable of bringing toughness, flexibility, and an attitude that offensive coordinators love. Sometimes that's exactly the ingredient an already talented offense needs to reach another level. When you step back and look at everything happening right now, you can feel the pressure points forming across this roster. New leadership in the front office, extra cap space suddenly available, questions at safety, questions along the edge, young players being asked to take bigger roles, veterans still sitting on the market, and then an offense quietly adding pieces that could make life miserable for opposing defenses. That's what makes this part of the NFL calendar so fascinating. The games haven't started yet, but jobs are being earned, decisions are being weighed, and expectations are already taking shape. Let me know which of these developments excites you the most and which one concerns you the most. As always, I appreciate every single one of you who keeps showing up and supporting this channel. Vikings Nation has been through a lot over the years, but the hope never leaves. We'll be right here following every twist and turn. Until next time, keep believing in the purple and gold. Stay tuned. Skol Vikings, let's go.